Forever chemicals are used to describe a family of chemicals referred to as PFAS. These chemicals were first invented to help support the war effort. So if you think about PFAS chemicals as providing resistance to stickiness, water, and stains, if you're a soldier in the trenches waiting for hours to have clothing that can help repel the water, that helped our soldiers during the war. And after the war, a lot of chemicals that were invented to support the war effort needed a new market. And so the new market became households. It's important to keep in mind that right now it's estimated that there are anywhere from 8,000 to 12,000 PFAS chemicals. When I first started learning about just one of them, which is called PFOA, and that was the chemical found in the inner lining of microwave popcorn bags. When I started learning about it in 2007, I did everything I could to avoid other products that had PFOA, which was the specific chemical in the PFAS family. And I learned it was in pots and pans. It could be in coatings to protect our carpets and rugs from stains. But to later learn that substitute chemicals are not necessarily safer was something I wish I knew sooner, and I think a lot of people should know. And we'll talk over the next few days over strategies to address the fact that substitute chemicals are not necessarily safer. PFAS chemicals are often referred to as everywhere chemicals as well because they're so persistent. They are expected to take at least a century to biodegrade. And so they are traveling the world, accumulating in people, animals, our food supply, and they're in a wide variety of consumer products. So as consumers, we need to do our part by learning how we can support manufacturers and products that are creating products that are safer for us. In one test, PFAS or forever chemicals were found in the blood of more than 98% of Americans. I'm sure this study didn't study all Americans, but they estimated that this chemical would be in 98% of Americans. And in another study, forever chemicals were found in all of the 293 infants that were tested. Scientific studies have shown that exposure to some of these PFAS chemicals in the environment may be linked to harmful health effects in humans and animals. So because of their persistence, they will travel the world through wind, water, our consumer products, our food supply and drinking water, and even the bottom of our shoes. But since consumer products and even our food supply have become an international endeavor, we also invite these international approaches towards chemicals and heavy metals into our homes through what we buy. As I said earlier, there are estimated to be anywhere from 8,000 to 12,000 PFAS chemicals. Some have been more studied than others. Two have been studied in great length. They are referred to as PFOA, which is also referred to as C8. I mentioned that earlier because it used to be used in the inner lining of microwave popcorn. And PFOS is another type of forever chemical that has been studied a lot. Partly why they both have been studied is because manufacturers of these chemicals were dumping them into areas that were contaminating the drinking water of certain communities. I'll touch upon that later, but related to these class action lawsuits, there was a panel referred to as the C8 Science Panel, and it consisted of, I think, 3 epidemiologists that a court appointed. This panel was appointed by the court to study the probable health effects of C8 or PFOA exposure. So I just want to show you screenshots of the website and their reports on their findings, which you can find on the website. The New York Times did an article on the lawyer who led one of the class action lawsuits against DuPont, which was one of the manufacturers, and we really have him to thank. Effects from PFAS accumulation. The National Library of Medicine is a great resource. If you ever have questions about how a toxic exposure may be affecting human health, you can just search here and find studies. This excerpt from a study is examining how PFAS exposure affects the brain, because it's been found to accumulate in the brain of humans and wildlife. What we know about the health effects of these forever chemicals. I'll just read the slide. Current peer-reviewed scientific studies have shown that exposure to certain levels of PFAS may lead to reproductive effects such as decreased fertility or increased high blood pressure in pregnant women, developmental effects or delays in children, including low birth weight, accelerated puberty, bone variations, or behavioral changes, increased risk of some cancers, including prostate, kidney, and testicular cancers, reduced ability of the body's immune system to fight infections, including reduced vaccine response, interference with the body's natural hormones, increased cholesterol levels, and/or risk of obesity. Additional health effects that are difficult to determine. I thought it would be helpful for you to understand some of the challenges of studying the health effects of these forever chemicals. The first bullet point says there are thousands of PFAS with potentially varying effects and toxicity levels, yet most studies focus on a limited number of better known PFAS compounds. And people can be exposed to PFAS in different ways and at different stages of their life. The timing of our exposure is important. So when you're exposed during rapid stages of development, that's when your exposures can have more long-term effects. So if a fetus is exposed, the brain and heart and the biological foundation is developing so dramatically that exposures to these chemicals can participate in that development. So that's why it's good to be really conservative. Other stages of life where there's rapid development include not only early childhood, but around adolescence. And also, I don't read as much about this, but menopause makes a lot of sense, because for women going through menopause, our hormones are changing dramatically. And it's probably not that well understood how the rest of our biology is changing as a result of our hormones. But I recently was watching a presentation on how the brain changes in women because of the hormonal changes. The last bullet says the types and uses of PFAS change over time, which makes it challenging to track and assess how exposure to these chemicals occurs and how they will affect human health. Again, the tips that I'm going to talk about at the end of today and over the next few days are common sense approaches that will help address the fact that this is very complicated and there's a lot that's not known. I just want to highlight that children do deserve extra protection. The first bullet point explains that children drink more water, eat more food, and breathe more air per pound of body weight than adults, which can increase their exposure to forever chemicals and other chemicals. Plus, like, young children have behaviors that put them more at risk because they crawl on the floors and put lots of things in their mouth. So that can lead to greater risk. And chemicals have been found in breast milk, but generally speaking, the benefits of breastfeeding far outweigh the risks. So keep that in mind, and there are more resources that address that. Now I'm going to talk about the low-hanging fruit, the cheap or free things we can do that add up to a lifetime of benefits in terms of reducing our toxic exposures. I consider what we buy low-hanging fruit because we can choose what we buy.